Hey guys, welcome to Cinematographs. I only started getting into film about a year ago, so there's tons of films that I haven't seen yet. I've never gone through a long period of time dedicated to watching films of just one genre, movement, or director, but I wanted to try something new to, 1, be able to pick up on shared styles between films while also consuming the film itself, 2, organize my watches better and probably reduce the time I spend deciding what to put on my screen, and 3, share my thoughts with you all and maybe even rank these films. I probably won't be doing it every single month, or at least making videos about it every single month because that's exhausting, but I kinda like this a month of insert director, actor, or whatever else comes to me in the future theme. And someone I've been meaning to study for a bit is Ikiru Kurosawa, a Japanese director from the mid-1900s. So all of November I watched his films. Now, in making these lists, there's no set number that I intend to see each month, it just depends on my schedule, and I did not watch all of his filmography. However, I did get 13 of them, which is pretty good considering the absolute units some of his films are. If you want to see which ones I watched, just pause the screen here or check the description for the list. For the sake of entertainment, I'll be going in order of worst to best. Some of my thoughts will be shorter than others because I don't want this video to be way too long. So here is my November 23 Ikiru Kurosawa watch list. Drunken Angel is the earliest film on this list, and watching it you can tell. The film is rougher in both its images and characters, though part of this is due to the fact that it is a film noir, down to the costuming, lighting, and score. But it doesn't feel like a Kurosawa at all. I could only maybe see it in the performances and camera movements, which is crazy because Rashomon was made only 2 years after this, and that one is so distinct. My biggest problem with this film is that it feels loose in its narrative. It doesn't have the same fluidity that I've come to love in his more popular works. I really wasn't sure what was going on at some points, which brings me to my next thing. I feel like I don't know what this film is about, and I mean that in its plot, not its theme. Because I know that the theme is trying to say that there is a sickness in society and cities that we don't want to face. However, what's actually on my screen delivering that message feels messy. It doesn't work for me, unfortunately, though it is one of Kurosawa's earliest films, so he did need some time to find his footing in how he wants to tell his stories. Pretty much everything I will say about Sanjuro applies to this one, and I watched that one first, so that's why I wrote more about it. The Hidden Fortress is more comedic and it does it well, but because of that I was more bored than with Sanjuro. I also think it says the least about Kurosawa's style as a filmmaker during this time period. Stray Dog was made a year after Drunken Angel, though it's better at building more of an enjoyable watch that doesn't lose itself in its plot. It's a pretty standard noir that contains some nice images and sequences. It's here where you can start to see Kurosawa's voice shining through, and I even feel like I was watching high and low at some bits. The film really is just what it is, and I don't think there's much to say about it. Sanjuro is the sequel to Kurosawa's Yojimbo, but the only thing that really makes it a sequel is the fact that it has the same character. The film feels more like a Kurosawa in style than substance. It's a lot more playful than his other films, which is why I think this one fell a little flat for me. I wasn't very drawn in, though it does do well in its comedic parts. The film's content and themes just have less stakes for me. They don't say as much about humanity as his others do. And having films that double as philosophical think pieces are what I prefer and think are his best films, especially because I love the depressing stuff. However, I think this film is just as much as a visual masterpiece as Yojimbo, if not more. I don't like Macbeth in the first place. In Kagemusha, a peasant must act like a powerful warlord to keep an empire together. There's big ideas of identity, deceit, and power, which I'm all for. It's probably the most memorable opening scene from his filmography. It's also his first film in color, and while I still prefer the aesthetic of his black and white stuff, there's an undeniable richness in how Kurosawa uses his colors. It's difficult for me to know what to make of this film because on one hand, I love the concept and everything it addresses, but on the other, it was a very slow watch towards the end. The film is 3 hours long and you can really feel its pacing. And it's sad because the first hour was super strong, but then the last hour killed me and was the slowest of all the Kurosawas. I also thought the film would be more intense than it actually was, so I was a little underwhelmed. I've seen people say that Yojimbo is one of the beginner Kurosawas, and I completely agree. Anyone getting into his films should start with this one. The shots are very beautiful, and it's one of those things where you can tell it just deserves to be watched on the big screen. I think it's up there in terms of ranking his films by cinematography, and it also featured my favorite score. There's nothing wrong with it, but the reason it's not a 10 out of 10 is because it just lacks that thing for me. It's a great experience, but in the days after finishing this film, it just doesn't stick in my mind. I think that might be because his style is almost dulled down in this film, or it feels more Western. It's telling you less about humanity and it's not as dramatic. It could also be that I went from Ikiru to this, which is transitioning from apples to oranges. But at the very least, this shows how versatile Kurosawa is as a filmmaker. There's probably not much about Rashomon that hasn't already been said. It was actually my first Kurosawa, which I watched way before deciding to do this video, so this was the only film of his that I had to rewatch for this. And the second time around, I still love it as much as I did the first, and it felt quicker to watch. Probably because I've gotten used to Kurosawa's style by now. Even still, the blocking, staging, and images are out of this world, and hold their own against the rest of his films. However, I do think that he has made films that were more subtle in saying whatever he wanted to say. Kurosawa was a painter, but you could probably pick that fact up from watching Ran, an adaptation of Shakespeare's King Lear. I haven't seen or read the play, so I don't know how good it was at doing that, but I was thoroughly entertained by Ran. That big fight scene in the middle of the film is one of the best sequences in cinematic history, though it's hard to really connect with the film and its characters until that moment. If you look at it, Ran is simple. Every character has a need which they express through manipulation and war. It's a typical narrative structure. Even the colors, as beautiful as they are simple. But none of that simplicity is a bad thing, and it makes it easier to be and stay impressed by this film. Okay, yes, I did put something that's a 9 out of 10 above two 10 out of 10s. Because I think both Ran and Rashomon are overall better films to watch, but Ikiru is strong on emotions, which is why I prefer it. It has my favorite message of every single film I've ever watched. It's about a man who learns that he will die soon due to stomach cancer. After this, he feels like he has wasted so much of his life with a monotonous job, living without passion. Before he dies, he searches for the meaning of life, and yeah, it's good, and yeah, it made me tear up. My only real gripe with it is that maybe around 60 or 70% in, the film slows down quite a bit, and I think it loses some emotion until the last few moments again. But still, Ikiru is one of those films where even if you don't completely enjoy the initial watch, there's certain scenes, lines of dialogue, or themes that will stay in your mind for days, and maybe even weeks later. Its message is powerful, and if you look at it on paper, you might think that it's obvious, but thinking about life and experiencing it through this film are two completely different things. I think everyone sees a part of themselves in the main character, no matter how self-aware or accomplished they are. There's something inherently human about this film, and it's definitely my favorite Takashi Shimura performance. He sort of embodies heartbreak and regret, and the film's last image is haunting. It's such a life-changing watch. You cannot know about Kurosawa without also knowing Seven Samurai. It's his longest movie, clocking in at just under 3.5 hours, though some of his other works are pretty close seconds. But the runtime isn't a concern because the film keeps you invested from start to finish, and time just passes by. The film is emotionally brutal in that there's love, death, and a message that can be applied to any point in history, even now, and have the same effect. It won't become outdated just because of how finely it depicts human nature. It somehow balances realism with Kurosawa's characteristic theatrical direction. I feel like in some of his films that style and the performances can feel too artificial, but here it's just right. Shimura's character provided the exact grounding that the film needed to last so long. There's a lot of emotions all backed up by more than just the narrative. Everything that you hear Kurosawa praised for is alive and well in this film. I have so much love for High and Low, and I could talk about it all day, but I don't want to ramble, so I'm just gonna say that there's tons of different social relationships in this film. It shows a lot about the complexity of morality, humanity, and most of all, wealth. The film is perfectly divided up in 3 parts, each with their own distinct look, and that's what makes it so interesting. But also, Kurosawa just has good dialogue, staging, and blocking per usual. High and Low surprises you with how good it is. It keeps you moving constantly, and I think it's a film anyone could get behind. I just don't know what else to say because it really speaks for itself. Redbeard, a story about a young doctor who ends up with a job at an impoverished clinic, hearing the life experiences of its patients, means so much more than its plot summary. It's a film that teaches us how we should treat others, especially people who need help. It is composed of quote-unquote short stories from different people with different backgrounds. With all of the patients here, there's a cycle of helping one another out, and the common thread that keeps this cycle going is simply kindness. It explores the why we are hardwired to do things, why we should care, and why we shouldn't separate ourselves from those problems if it's not something we have to be around. It contains some of my favorite images, which are clean and perfectly refined. All of Kurosawa's technical skills are on point in this film. The bell chimes, the sound of wind, the soft voices, the fight scenes, if you can even call them that. This is the first 3-hour Kurosawa where I did not get tired at any moment. It's the opposite of Kagemusha, where it only gets better with time as Kurosawa develops more themes and heartbreaking moments. It's just so delicate. This film would give me a warm hug, and at the same time, it has the power to break, whether that be breaking the hearts of its viewers or breaking its characters. I'm afraid of talking about it too much, like I'll say something that ruins the experience of a film that is just fragile. Like Seven Samurai and Ikiru, it means so much, and it's going to continue meaning so much, no matter how much time has passed. So there you have it, my ranking and thoughts of most well-known Kurosawas. Something so unique about him as a director is that he manages to accomplish something different in each of his films, and I feel as if his filmmaking style has clearly evolved with each decade. I didn't say this in every review because I didn't want to get repetitive, but most of the films on this list show how to utilize a frame. I mean in how he stages characters, has them move around, or just the pieces in the background that embellish the screen. Even in the films that I didn't like or weren't too interested in, aside from his 1940s works, I would go back and study them because they all just have such good filmmaking techniques. High and Low and Redbeard will probably battle it out for my favorite Kurosawa film the next time I choose to rewatch them. He has this thing where each time you watch one of his films, you think to yourself, yeah, this is the one. And he manages to prove you wrong every single time.